Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Owen Wallace, and today I'll be presenting alongside Gabriel Hargy and Charlie Judd about one of the biggest issues we face today, the recycling conundrum. Next slide, please. In an increasingly commercialized and materialistic world, municipal solid waste is one of the largest and most salient threats to the natural environment. The default solution for many years has been to put almost all of our solid waste into landfills. However, this has disastrous consequences for the environment. As seen in this chart from the Environmental Protection Agency, municipal solid waste landfills account for more than 15% of all methane emissions in the US and are the third largest source of human-related methane emissions in the world. A solution to this problem has been implemented in the past few decades, collecting and recycling waste that can be repurposed. However, this has failed to address the problem. Next slide, please. One of the largest issues we are faced with concerning physical waste is a general global lack of recycling. Recycling, being as consumer-friendly and economically beneficial as it is, should be far more pervasive than it currently is. Many cities in America and many more around the world have set in place recycling programs. However, a widespread program has never been successfully implemented. Looking at recycling programs worldwide, it's clear that not enough material is being recycled. Green America, a nonprofit organization dedicated to environmentalism, reported that 75% of the United States waste stream can be recycled or composted, but we're only doing so for just over 34% of it. As seen here, much of the waste that we produce is not recycled, regardless if it can be or not. Furthermore, as demonstrated by the Environmental Protection Agency in the chart, less than a quarter of all waste produced in the US is actually recycled, with half of all of it going into landfills. What we need to ask is what should be done to increase the amount of materials that are being recycled? Next slide, please.
One solution is investment in recycling education. As Michael Lounsbury, professor of sociology at the University of Alberta, has stated, social movement activism enabled recycling to become transformed into a mainstream economic institution. Social activism has been a driving force of recycling programs. But before activism can take place, people must be educated about the topic. One of the major barriers to a circular waste economy in many countries, according to Louis Akenji, executive director of SEED, which is a global partnership dedicated to sustainability, is a general lack of information and education. This means that putting an emphasis on education on recycling and the waste economy would be beneficial. In addition, ecology and recycling education efforts directed toward high school and elementary school students have proven to be effective in establishing a desire to recycle. This has been shown by Sarah Hannigan of Hamline University, who found that, quote, students who are educated about the topic of recycling will have an increase in positive attitudes and behaviors. Using education materials simply to make consumers aware of the products made from recycled materials has also been shown to have a positive influence on recycling rates, as shown by research from Dr. Karen Page Winterick of Penn State's Department of Marketing. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of the educational materials that can be used to increase awareness. These inform the audience about what can and cannot be recycled and introduce them to various methods of dealing with waste and their relative effectiveness. Next slide, please. There are some noteworthy limitations to this solution. As shown in a study published in the journal Social Sciences, recycling education programs fail to reach minority groups, being unable to increase recycling awareness or change recycling behavior in any meaningful way among them. It has been also shown that social pressure, such as that produced by education programs, is ineffective at encouraging recycling. Doctor of Psychology Mark Prattarelli found that, quote, social pressure is inconsistent with encouraging community participation in recycling programs. Finally, educational efforts could prove ineffective on their own. Hannah Williams of Illinois Wesleyan University admits that, despite her support of recycling education, education alone can be limited as a strategy. Overall, the implications of this solution are that, while the public would be more educated on the topic, the proposed solution may fail to increase recycling behavior. Next slide, please.
Another possible solution is to reduce plastic use in mass-produced products in order to curb the plastic production. As shown here by Our World in Data, a highly respected organization for data collection, packaging far outweighs any other source of plastic pollution, meaning that reducing plastics in packaging would have a greater impact. Tesco and ASDA, the first and second largest British grocery retailers, respectively, are phasing out the use of unnecessary plastic films for products such as multi-buy tins, yogurt pots, greeting cards, and bed linen. Soft drink companies, including giants such as Coca-Cola and Pepsi, have also invested heavily in dispensers in order to encourage use of customers' own bottles and decrease the production and number of plastic and glass Coke bottles. On the smaller side, there are eco-based companies that are working on better methods of packaging. For example, the Carlsberg Group, a multinational brewery that is credited with the creation of the pH scale, has created a revolutionary packaging system for six-pack beers. Instead of the environmentally degrading and rarely recycled plastic packaging, they have created a glue dot system that allows for easy transportation and reduced packaging plastics. This shows that the solution is both probable and realistic, since it has been implemented by both ends of the economic spectrum, with Coke and Carlsberg both investing in implementing less plastic in their packaging. Our plastic usage as it is now is not sustainable, as half of all plastic made is used once. By reducing the amount of plastic in packaging, we will once again be able to have a sustainable recycling program/industry. Next slide, please. It is harder to enable these changes due to the fact that the implementation of policies to reduce plastic in packaging will be hard to achieve. The biggest challenge will be the fact that packaging is used more often to ensure the shelf life of foods. So we would have to research and develop new technologies that use less plastic and still effectively preserve food. Profit margins for companies may suffer because, as shown here by packaging expert Sarah Greasley, single-use plastic packaging is generally half the price of the next cheapest packaging option. Next slide, please.
After careful examination of either supporting education or recycling plastic packaging, we have determined that the better solution is education. Education is effective in creating, sustaining, and encouraging participation in recycling programs and could easily be expanded to raise recycling rates. While significant financial investment is necessary to make manufacturing environmentally friendly, existing recycling education programs could be expanded with lower upfront costs. Even though individual companies are taking steps toward increased recyclability for their products' packaging, this doesn't mean that sweeping change is possible, and it would likely require government regulation. Education's potential as a solution far outweighs its limitations also, as its impact could go beyond increased recycling rates to encompass a social impetus for institutional change. It is clear that the first step that should be taken to improve the current recycling system should be investing in recycling education. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, guys. Really, really nice job. I got a couple of questions for you, and then we will move on to the next group. Let's see, the first question will be for Owen. Owen, how did the group decide to include Charlie's lens in your final presentation? Like, which parts of that were Charlie's, and why did you guys include it?
So Charlie's perspective was social and cultural, and we integrated that mostly in Solution 1, which examined education as a social tool. Most of his research had to be discarded, but one of the sources he found, which was the quote from Pretorelli, was included in the examination of the first solution. A lot of fundamental ideas from his research were used in Solution 1, such as the relationship between recycling and social phenomena being shown in form of Lusenbury's explanation of recycling and social movement. We also used his perspective in the problem side to lay the foundation of the entire presentation, as we kind of used his to look into the problem with the current social institutions.
Terrific. Excellent. Thanks. Charlie, reflecting on your colleagues' work, so the work that both of them did, which would you say, was it Gabriel's or Owen's research, had the biggest impact on the way you think about this problem right now?
Gabriel's work had the greatest impact for me because he covered the economic side of recycling as a whole, and of how he cited the EPA on the 680,000 jobs created by recycling and the National Institute for Health on how recycling creates 36 times as many jobs as waste incineration does. He also went into specific solutions, such as how he cited the Aluminum Association, the American Economic Review, and the Business Insider, all of which supported targeted investment in aluminum recycling specifically. Because he cast such a wide net with his research, he helped me understand the economic side of recycling much better and gave me a broader perspective.
Terrific. And then as a great follow-up question to that, so Gabriel, your team's final resolution was that education was really going to be the key, right? So looking back at your IRR, like how do you think differently about what you wrote there based on how your team chose to solve this problem?
I'm sorry, I kind of like broke off. I didn't quite hear the last part of that. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, because your team chose the solution of education, how does that make you think differently about what you wrote in your own IRR?
Investigation like slash research on the area of my research that focused on the costs of recycling and processes that reduce plastic. For instance, such as Carlsberg's dissolvable glue dot system for beer packaging. It would have been interesting to see the many different solutions that are out there in the world, because we could have made our presentation a bit more interesting and like engaging for the audience. I am glad the information that I do have is able to be helpful to the presentation and project overall. However, if I were to do this project over again, I would have researched and focused more on the actual cost of replacing plastics, since we only state that it is just slightly more costly. So, because this would have helped to alleviate fears of economic overkill in trying to replace plastics in order to reduce plastic usage.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. You guys can applaud if you like.